Thanks, dancers, for that offering, and welcome to chapel. It is my privilege to introduce one of my best friends, Krysten Everhart. She is an awesome person, and we've had some great adventures together. Please give her your full attention as she gives her senior reflection, and please help me welcome Krysten.
Okay, so choices are things that have to be made every day. For example, what you're going to wear to school or what you're going to eat for breakfast, and there's so many more. My story is about choices that are both good and bad. These choices were ones that have helped shape my life into the person that I am today. Before I tell you about that story, I'm going to tell you about my family. I have an amazing family, and we're all really close, and even though I don't say it enough, I really do love them. My mom is a pharmacy manager at Walgreens, and she's the best person I know. She's always up for late night dinners after work and is always there when I need her. Most of you know my dad, and he's the youth pastor at Friendship Christian Reformed Church, and he's also my best friend. He's not afraid to call me out when he knows I'm wrong, even though I like to think I could take him sometimes. And then I have 3 little sisters, Amberlyn, who's 10, Emily, who's 8 going on 18, and Cindy, who's 7, and definitely the baby of the family. Then there's my grandparents. My grandpa is my #1 supporter, and I am so thankful for him. My grandma is the most godly person I know, and she's always reminding me that in every situation, either good or bad, we have to praise God for what he has given us. My aunt and uncle have also had a major impact on my life, and I'm so happy to have them. My aunt is so loving and is always willing to go on random ice cream dates just to talk about nothing. And my uncle is the most caring person in the world, and if you ever need something fixed, just call him up and he got the duct tape. Finally, there's McKinley. She brings so much joy to my whole family, and I'm so thankful to have her in my life. Even on the worst days, she can make anybody laugh. So the part of my story that I want to share today starts about 7 years ago when my grandma was diagnosed with cancer. My grandma and I had a very close connection, and receiving this news hit hard. I was mad at God and for letting something so bad happen to one of the best people that I knew. I felt scared and abandoned. Around that time, my family had joined Friendship Christian Reformed Church, and without even knowing it, one of the first people that I met became my best friend. Growing up, it was hard for me to make friends, but this time it was different. We had only hung out a couple of times, but it seemed like we had known each other since we were in kindergarten. She was able to help me to deal with everything that was going on in my life. Thinking back on it now, I know that God put her in my life to show me that he had never abandoned me. I was able to realize that God was my best friend that I had had forever, but I never really realized it. Yes, I had my earthly best friend to lean on and comfort me, but what I came to realize is that she wouldn't always be there for me like God was. It was about 1.5 years ago when the idea of not having my best friend became reality. The choices that we made turned us into people that I never thought we would become. It all started when she had some problems come up at her house. In order to cope with these issues, she began to do some bad things. I thought that because we were best friends and she had helped me through my hard times, I had to be there for her like any good best friend would. So I made the choice to get involved with some of the bad things in order to keep my best friend. I knew by choosing to get involved with those things, I would risk losing almost all of the other relationships in my life, but I was willing to risk anything as long as I had my best friend. I was able to come to the realization a couple months later that I had made the wrong choice. I was on a path that I promised myself I would never go on. I used to have an amazing relationship with my whole family, but to them during that time, I was just a teenager living in their house that cared when she wanted to. I also lost my relationship with my grandparents. To me, they just became family members that I had to put up with on Sundays. When I realized this, I didn't want to keep it to myself. I wanted to share it with my best friend so that just maybe I would be able to get her back on the right track as well. But my plan didn't work as well as I wanted it to. I was left with a choice. I would have to lose my best friend and go back to the life that God wanted me to live, or I would keep my best friend and live the life that I wanted to. This was the hardest decision that I would ever have to make. I knew that in order not to lose myself, I would have to lose the person that meant the most to me. So I made the choice to lose her and go back to the life that God had planned for me, and soon I became filled with hatred towards her. I felt like I had nobody to lean on. I didn't have any other close friends because I had invested so much time in trying to help my best friend. I had lost my relationship with my family, and I felt like I had lost God, too. I began to hate her with everything that I was. I know that hate is a really strong word, but it was appropriate. I was so mad at her for not being able to realize that the way she was living was not leading her anywhere. I was so frustrated and filled with hate that I began to live my life as an emotionless person. I faked my way through life. I kept telling myself that I had forgiven her, but I knew deep down that I wouldn't be able to move on with my life until I dealt with those issues. It took me a long time to forgive her because the hate always got in the way. I had to choose to let go of the hatred because it wasn't doing anything but ruining the new life that God wanted for me. This realization led me to a choice that helped me turn my life around for the better. I was able to choose to forgive her and choose to let the hatred go. By letting go of the hatred that I had towards her, I was able to forgive her more easily, and I was able to move on with my life. A Bible verse that comes to mind is Ephesians 4:31, verse 32. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. Reading this passage shows me that if God is able to forgive all the sins of the world, I think I should be able to forgive someone too. Now, I don't want you to think that just because I had forgiven her, I was able to jump back into the relationships that I had before I made those choices. I had to work to fix the relationships that I had before, and I'm still working on them. It also took me a while to make new friends. This was hard for me because I became really cautious of who I hung out with and who I was making friends with. The time I spent between losing my best friend and making new friends was time for me to reconnect with God. During that time, I was able to make the realization that I had before. God was the only best friend that I needed. And by reconnecting my relationship with God, I was able to gain some new friends, and I couldn't be more happy. From breaking toilets in Guatemala with no Spanish-speaking abilities to try to fix them with Steffi Linhout, to random ice cream dates, I can say that I'm truly blessed. I don't want you guys to leave this chapel thinking that if your friend makes a bad choice, then you have to break off the friendship. But I do want you to think about the choices that you have in life, because life is filled with decisions that can dictate your future. I chose to hate, but I also chose not to hate. But the choice to move on with the life that God had for me after will always be the best choice that I have ever made. I had the choice to keep all the hatred and bitterness locked up, but instead I chose to move on and let it go. I have also made the choice to continue to pray for her, even though we haven't talked in over a year, and I hope and pray that she finds a way to forgive me for my hatred as well. Looking back, I can see that it was not me that was making those decisions, but the Holy Spirit was. He saved me from myself. We all have the choice to be kind and compassionate to the people that we see as enemies. All of our emotions tell us that if we don't like someone, then we can't pray for them or be compassionate for them. But the beautiful thing is that we have a choice to overcome those emotions and pray and be compassionate for our enemies. Luke 6:27 through 28 says, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you." We all have the choice to live the life that God has for us, and I promise you that following that path will not always be easy, but it'll always be the best choice that you can ever make. Thank you.